The real way they get characters in movies to appear bigger or smaller is way crazier than you think. Chances are you've seen a movie or TV show where there was a character who was giant or very small, like Buddy the Elf in the movie Elf or the Hobbits in the Lord of the Rings movies. And you probably just assume that they were digitally shrunk somehow. Maybe they shot them on a green screen and just composited them into the frame. And that's definitely done in some movies, especially more and more nowadays. But the way that characters in Elf or the Lord of the Rings franchise or the Harry Potter franchise or Star Wars or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind or many others are made to look bigger or smaller than they actually are is not actually done digitally or with visual effects at all. It's all done in real life, in camera, on the set, through a process called forced perspective. If you hold up two objects and you move one closer to the camera and one further away from the camera, you can make this object look bigger and this object look smaller. However, there are certain perspective indicators that help us to know that these aren't actually their sizes, like focus. Since this is more in focus right now and this is more blurry, we know that this is actually further away from the camera and not smaller. And then there's also relative size of objects, like if I held up this pen, I would know that this is not actually giant, it's still the size of a pen because there's a pen next to it. And then there's also eye line, where if we hold these two objects up and we hold them like this, we know that they're not actually on the same plane because they're not looking at each other in the right way, so it shows our brain that they're not actually on the same plane. Forced perspective creates an illusion by removing all of those indicators and tricking our brain into thinking that we're looking at something that's actually bigger or smaller than it's supposed to be. So for instance, the way that director Jon Favreau made Buddy the Elf look much larger than the other elves in the North Pole was by doing things like building a classroom set where there would be a tiny little desk, much smaller than human size, up close to the camera where Will Ferrell would sit. And then in the background, far away from the camera, there would be big desks, much larger than human size, where the other elves would sit. And then he would line it up in the camera so it all looked like it was in the same plane. And then he would remove any of the indicators that it wasn't in the same plane, like any kind of depth of field difference, so that there was no difference in blurriness between the foreground and the background. And also, he would make prop objects like pencils or pens that would be different sizes to create the illusion that they were all on the same plane. Like the objects on Will Ferrell's desk would be tiny, and the objects on the elves' desk would be big. The issue with this is that you can't move the camera because everything's lined up perfectly in the frame, and if the camera moves, it destroys the illusion. So for the Lord of the Rings, because they wanted to be able to move the camera during these shots where Gandalf is interacting with the hobbits, they actually created these elaborate motion control mechanisms where parts of the set would actually physically move along with the camera to maintain the perspective and keep the illusion going. These elaborate shots take months or possibly years to plan and days to execute just to create this illusion that helps to sell a story to you without having to rely on things like CGI. And real quick, if you like my videos and you want to see more in-depth writing from me, you can do that here.